3 main ideas for your story, then these are what you want to keep in mind when we're going through the writing tips, because they're going to be really important to apply those writing tips to the ideas you want to communicate. So we're really trying to get to the heart of your stories. So I think Jenny will send a message if there are any weird things going on with Zoom, and we'll try and fix them along the way. But otherwise, here we go.
So we're going to jump into the writing must knows here. So this will be a little bit of time for you guys to just sit and absorb the info we're sharing, and then we'll have some time for questions or anything like that.
Yeah, and as always, if you feel like you need to get up, go to the toilet, get a drink, food, whatever, feel free. That's totally fine. We're not going to be offended if you need to walk out in the middle. That's all good.
Again, if you need anything, just call out. I can walk around. Yep. Do we get this later?
We can send the slides through. Yeah, that's fine. All right, so we're going to start by talking about the reader. So first, we want you to be thinking when you're writing about your reader or your audience. Who might be reading your story? How will they interpret the words that you put on the page? Is the heart of your story actually going to come through to them? So that's the main thing we want to achieve with writing. So we want you to have another quick discussion, maybe with the person next to you or among your table, about different audiences. So online, we can maybe just do it among the big group. That's totally fine. So have a quick discussion about, an example of audiences might be young mothers or students or other writers. Who do you want to read your story, and what do you want them to know? So have a quick discussion about that, just a couple minutes, and then we'll tune back in. I think Sydney and I might move around to join in your chats.
Online, maybe it might be easiest if we type it into the chat, just so that it's a sort of brainstorming exercise. So thinking about some of the audiences who you might be writing for. Yeah, migrants, Davina. Oh, Fahad. Great minds think alike.
Yeah, they do. It's really hard to think about that, who's reading, because usually when I am hoping to write, I'm writing, I think it's more of a tool for myself. So it's hard for me to think.
Yeah, but that's a great one as well, right? Like a really big part of the audience is yourself, who you are in this moment. So yeah, Davina, your own children as well. Anyone else want to put something in the chat? So thinking about who will be reading what you write. Yeah, definitely Joaria. Other professional migrant women. What about maybe people who aren't migrant women, and maybe people who don't have this experience, like maybe sort of building that empathy? I'm guessing yes, maybe not. Yeah, definitely, Junie. It's a part of storytelling. It's like getting people to know you, right? Like that's one of the ways that they get to know you.
So then would you say that that's an audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Tatiana. Carolina, I can see you're connecting to audio. Did you want to say something? Okay. Did anyone else have any other thoughts about any new audiences that we haven't talked about so far? Yeah, that's a great one, Susie. Definitely a really, really good example. Kelly, we're just sharing our thoughts in the chat.
Hello, we are going to come in a minute.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say to everyone online, I'm about to announce this, but just so you know, Fabi has just said she's going to be sharing with everyone in the workshop their Google Drive folders with their stories in them. So that's for today if you want to be developing or editing your story, but also ongoing when we have our editors come in, everything will just be in that folder. You can find it really easily. All that. Great. Right, I think I'm going to pull everyone together.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And we're back in.
Alrighty, can everyone tune back in, please? Hello, thank you. Thank you all so much for sharing. We heard some really great stuff in there, and you know, if at lunch you all want to share, intermingle and share some of your audiences and things, I think that's a great idea.
I think we had some great ideas about who we can share the book with when it's done.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing to remember with audiences, no matter who your audience is, it's probably not going to be people who you already know. It's not going to be your friends and family. So think about that when you're writing your story. You're writing it to a stranger, so you'll tell it a bit differently to how you would tell it, you know, over coffee with friends. And when we're sort of talking about all of these other things like structure, language, and imagery, keep in mind your audience and think about how they will receive and think about your message. So with that in mind, we're going to start off with structure. So structure is something that can vary really greatly depending on what the writer's trying to achieve. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with this sort of start, middle, end. So this is kind of the most common literary or narrative structure. So the start will involve setting the scene. It's usually not a time of conflict. It's where things are just coasting along and going as normal. You kind of set up the story. Then the middle is where problems start to arise. There might be a major point of conflict or a huge decision that the main character has to make. And then the end is, you know, where the conflict is resolved. You might see the character change or become someone new, and you kind of return to a state of peace and happiness. That's not necessarily how human lives go. So this is just something to keep in mind. We've got an example here.
Yeah, and so just to, you know, quickly mention, different languages and cultures will have different storytelling norms and structures. So if you have one that is like authentic to you, you can do that. We're going to talk a bit more about that at the end though. But I'll run through this example. To clarify, Kevin is the dog. I realized I didn't put that in there. Just a new character called Kevin goes missing. But in our story, the start is that Fabiola adopts a dog named Kevin. They bond and then live happily together. Stasis. This is the start of our story. Everything's kind of normal. And then in the middle, Fabiola takes Kevin on a walk and Kevin's collar breaks and he runs away. Fabiola cannot find Kevin. She's very stressed and running around to try and find him. She puts up posters of Kevin to try and find him. That is our middle. There's a turning point. Something happens. The reader is going, what's going to happen next. I need to know what's going to happen, and that's how we keep our reader hooked in our story. And then the end is Fabiola gets a call from one of her neighbours who has found Kevin, and they are reunited. And then if you think about it, we have done kind of a full circle. So now we're back to the start. They're living happily together again. But there's been this whole arc in the middle. And so maybe Fabiola's character has developed because she's learnt maybe how much she truly loves Kevin and how much he means
more
to her.
careful and
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we're trying to achieve with structure.
That was a very simple sort of kid's story, but we wanted to use that because we're about to show you how you can change that structure.
Exactly. So you can also do what we call an inverted narrative. So it begins with the final moment, and then it returns in order to hook the reader and kind of build some intrigue. So it kind of starts with, you know, this is all happy and nice, but the reader's like, okay, but how did we get here? I want to know. So they'll keep reading. So then the end, Fabiola gets the call. So in the beginning of the story, you have Fabiola getting a call from a neighbor and going, we found your dog. Maybe Fabiola's really happy they're reunited. It's really beautiful. And then you go back to the start for the actual middle of your story. So you go, Kevin is found, and then Fabiola adopts Kevin, and we kind of see them bonding initially, and then Fabiola loses Kevin, and it's sad, but the reader already knows that there's a happy ending, so it's kind of a bit of a different feel to the story. So that might be something that you want to employ.
And with that one, you just have to be careful that not about showing the timeline that you're in, and keeping the reader aware of where you are in time. But you might also not want to follow either of those structures or any structure. So for example, if you're writing poetry, that tends not to have such a start, middle, and end. It might be a bit more of just capturing emotion and feelings. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, this is I looked at the blog for recommended writing tips on the blog as well. So because it's a short story, you were saying it's a short creative nonfiction. You also often start in media res, which is in the middle of the action.
Yeah.
And unlike fiction where you have character arcs, sometimes some characters don't develop in real life.
That's very
true. They just stay, silly all their lives.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to flag that in the short story will be more of a vignette where they may not be a start, or you might start in the middle and then you might just stay in the middle.
Yeah.
And there's no resolution, there's no happy ending or even tragic ending. It's just you just stay there.
Yeah.
Hovering.
Depending on the pace of your story, you might touch on points from a whole year of your life, or it might be one day, or even just one conversation. So even in one conversation, you can have a start, middle, and end, but it will be on like a micro level. Like you're saying that you're not going to necessarily change who you are by the end of that. But yeah, you can think about playing with structure, or you can think about it being just a moment in time and you don't have that kind of full story. The next thing we're going to chat about is language. So obviously language has rules, the grammar and sentence structure, but today we really want to encourage you playing with them and experimenting with them. So don't spend too much time worrying about whether your language is correct or not. And because I think that's half the fun of writing, is language is a toolbox, and you can pick what tools you want to use and how you want to use them. Obviously, you do have to think about that reader that we mentioned earlier and making sure your reader can pick up on what you're saying. So start off with fairly simple language and then you can build from there. You also don't have to stick to one language. If you speak multiple languages, or if you've heard words in other languages, you can include them. Obviously, the basis of it will have to be for an English reader, but you can add particular words, or some words are not translatable, or maybe something a family member said to you. Feel free to mix it up a bit there.
And so we wanted to talk about how you can slightly change the words you use in your sentence structure to convey a different tone or feeling through your language, all about what you want that reader to feel. So we want to say to someone, or put in our story, that it was a cold morning. You can do it really simply. You can just say the morning was cold. If you have maybe you want to just get to the point and there's some action you want to get to, you can just like, the morning was cold, move on. Otherwise, you can do it a bit more casually. It was chilly that morning. If you want a bit more of a friendly feel with your reader and you want them to relate to you a bit more, you might say it in the way, like, this doesn't have to be your version of casual, this is just mine. You say it as you would to a friend.
Yeah, a bit more like a diary entry.
Yeah.
I'm more of a descriptive person, but I was up to 2,500 words and after it changed, and I realized it's not me. I don't want to write the morning source code. I want to write the descriptive way.
Yeah.
So with the pressure or limited number of words, it changes.
Yes,
Absolutely.
So with that, you might decide then to be more descriptive, but you're telling a shorter story or just a smaller moment in time. So you can, rather than going through your whole day really simply, you could go through just your morning in a descriptive way. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to do imagery in a second, and so we'll talk a bit about picking and choosing when is the right time to use that descriptive language. There might be something that is the true focus of your story, and so you want to build that picture rather than focusing on, and maybe you want to talk about the train ride, like a certain train ride or something. You don't need to be super descriptive about what you're wearing unless it's relevant, how the walk was, what the weather was like, or anything like that. You want to be descriptive about how you're feeling and the moment, rather. Yeah, if that makes sense. And then, yeah, formal, if you want it to be a little bit more, I don't know, if you want it to be more like an essay or something like that, you can say the temperature was low in the morning. You can also do descriptive, like we were talking about. Oh, it's missing a tape. That's right. This morning there was dew on the grass and I could see my breath in the air. So that's that imagery that we're talking about, and we'll get more into how to create those. Next. Beautiful. So let's talk about imagery. Imagery is when you use descriptions to create a picture in your reader's mind. So you would have all read books with imagery in them, or you would have heard, you know, if you listen to podcasts, sometimes they'll use imagery, things like that. It can be a really strong writing technique, but it can also be overused. I know that some people, I don't know, the only example that pops into my head is like Lord of the Rings. I don't know if anyone's had a look at any of that. So the authors will use a whole page to describe a tree. If that is relevant to your story and you want your reader to understand the significance of the tree, you might want to spend that much time on it. But you need to think about what is actually important in your story and what you want to convey. So you want to make sure you don't slow down your story too much or confuse the reader by having too many images at once. And you just need to balance your imagery with dialogue and action to keep the pace going. And a great way to start with images, maybe if you're a little bit nervous to use descriptive language or anything like that, you can use one strong motif, which is just an image that happens again and again in your story, and so the reader really connects with it, and you just repeat it throughout. So it might be like in our story about Fabiola and her dog Kevin.
We made up.
Yeah, we made up a story about you. It might be Kevin's red collar, so something literal that the reader keeps seeing, and so maybe they're going, what is it about this collar? And maybe it represents something that you bring up, or it could be something metaphorical like Kevin's brave spirit. Maybe that keeps coming up in the story, and so it sticks in the reader's mind and creates that.
You could also draw on the objects that you brought today. They could be something that you describe and you return to, you know, a ring. Every time you look down at your hand, it's there and it reminds you of something. So,
and so these are some examples of images. So I found this quote that I really liked. Night came walking through Egypt, swishing her black dress. So this author has made night into a person, and it gives you such a clear image, or at least for me, it gives me such a clear image of that. You can do something like, my thoughts were clouds in my mind, walking to school that morning was like wading through mud, you know, things like this. And it can really be anything. What we learned when we learned poetry at uni was the more weird and unusual, the better. Yeah. If you want to do straightforward images, that's totally fine. It can be really effective. You can also do something totally random, and just to connect those two ideas might catch the reader off guard and have a really interesting effect.
Yeah, don't be afraid to make it personal, like your association. You don't have to go for the typical, like the sky was black at night. You know, you can pick your interpretation, and that will also give the reader more of an idea of who you are. So they'll get a glimpse into your mind, which is, I think, half the point of writing.
Yeah.
We're gonna go
Sorry.
back.
No lunch yet.
So now we're going to chat about dialogue. And I personally find this one of the hardest parts to include in writing because it's really hard to make it sound natural and real. So you don't have to include any dialogue if you don't want to, especially in a short piece like this. But if you do, there's an example on the screen of just the sort of punctuation and how you would write about it. So you have quote marks, what they said, comma, end quote, and then you say who said it. That's a really simple way of doing it. And when you are putting dialogue in, you don't need to include the whole conversation. So you don't have to go from hello to goodbye. You can just pick the best quote. So you can start off by summarizing, we were chatting about the flight. And then you can say just the key line that they said that was something unique or you really needed to know the way they said it. Otherwise, you can just summarize a conversation. When you're done, reading dialogue out loud, literally saying it out loud, can be a really good way to see if it sounds real and like a conversation. I would recommend doing that, even if it's kind of quietly to yourself. Definitely try reading it out loud.
Yeah. And so what we wanted to say lastly is we've given you some tips and maybe guidelines / rules today, but just like we were saying before, they're made to be broken. So if you feel like your story would benefit from something like having absolutely no structure and your thoughts on a page, go for it. If you feel like you don't want to use quote marks in your dialogue, you just want the dialogue to exist in the story and the reader has to figure it out and try really hard to figure it out, do it. If you feel like you want a whole story of imagery, even though we told you it can be overused,
do it.
Why not? It's to have fun and do whatever you feel drawn to and whatever expresses your story the most authentically possible.
And also on that rule breaking, so yes, the final submissions need to be 500 words, but you can write more than that to start off with and then cut it down. Yeah. So don't think too much about rules and structure now. You can just put all of your thoughts on the page and then either you can edit it yourself afterwards or we will have that editing workshop and we can just pick the best parts.
Yeah.
Writing freely and poetic, like I studied English and French literature, so 14 textbooks with poetry and novels and all of that. Then I joined the corporate world and then English, simple English. Yes, I learned to and I struggled for quite a few years. Now I'm very much into corporate writing. I feel like I lost that creativity. So when I wrote, so that one of the reasons I wanted to write was to go back to my old self. How do you balance that when you write, oh my God, it's plain, but it's not really, it's your story, but the language matters. So how do you balance that out to what you just said about your rules, the imagery, the dialogue, and everything, and like a corporate right?
I think that's where handwriting really helps. For me, a laptop is professional writing and corporate, and handwriting is just for myself to start off with. So that helps me switch between the two modes. The other thing I would say is sometimes changing text type. So you're never going to write corporate poetry. So maybe start off with poetry because that might help you get in the more creative zone.
You can also try one of the things that I find helps get me in the zone is journaling. So if you do a page of journaling, you're obviously not going to be thinking about, when you're journaling, you don't want to be thinking about any of this either. You're not thinking about a reader. No one's going to read it. You just write a page and then that might flick that switch and then you go, oh, I really like that. And even going through and underlining or highlighting key bits that you're like, I want to pull these out and put them in my story. Underline something you've written, make that the first line of your story, start writing. Something like that can really help.
And also, I find that when we want to get into something that we are not quite comfortable with, we can actually channel an avatar, And it could be anything, your favorite writer, or a person that you admire, or, your mom, or anybody. So, okay, what would, my mom say in this moment? And you just you channel that avatar into yourself then you start writing. And you can do that for many things, you know, having a difficult conversation or a good conversation or, you know, anything that you want, you always can channel whatever you want to express.
Yeah.
There is a journaling tip that I received from the person who actually taught me how to journal. So like a few things. So one is set up a timer as you guys did with us, 5 minutes, and play really cool music that you love. But something that I really liked is that she said, just give it a title. For example, I see that rocket and it says, oh, how I rocketed to Australia. That knows, like give it a title that is so cool. Or for example, with the dog story, I don't know, the day that I found my love or whatever, like just give it a really cool name and just start writing about it with like the craziest name that you can think about and start writing about that. I find that very helpful.
Yeah,
That's great.
a great tip.
Yeah.
On the avatar thing as well, I think channeling your inner kid can be a really good way to get in the zone. I think in the corporate world or just in general, we're really expected to be serious professional adults that don't like having fun and we just want to do our work. But think about what you liked doing as a kid or like what you would do if no one was watching, you know, that kind of like dancing in your lounge room, having fun, just sort of free spirit sort of thing. So sometimes thinking about your story from more of a child's mind can help too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. So how are we all feeling? Maybe we need like a bit of a, I feel like I could do a deep breath.
Yeah.
Lovely. Just quickly before we go on lunch, Fabiola is going to share with everyone their Google Drive folders with their stories in them, just for access now, but also when we start editing, everything will be in there that you need access to. So we're not going through emails, etc., etc.
So we are going to have a bit of a break now just to reset. You can let all of that kind of information settle in your brain and you could come back ready to write. So over your break, we do have a little task for you. Just chat to the people in the room about what you want to write about or what you have written about, and pay attention to how you summarize your story or your thoughts. Otherwise, just enjoy getting to know everyone. You can walk down the street if you need to. You head into the kitchen. There is so much food on that table. Please, please eat it. And if you've got anything you want to chat about, come up to us.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Thanks, guys.
So there are plates in the kitchen if you need to.
Holly,
Thanks,
when are we
everyone.
coming-
Happy lunch break.
When are we coming back?
Thank you.
So
Back, so it's 11:03. We've got, I think we've got an hour. We'll just double check if it's half an hour or an hour, but I think we allowed an hour. So if we come back at 12:20.
so I'll put that in the chat for everyone.
That we were thinking about before, out of our head. Oh, that's so first of all, we want you to all take a moment, if you did end up talking to some of the other participants and everyone here about your story, just think about how you summarized your story to those other people. What were the key moments? Who were the key characters? And take a moment to write that down at the top of your page, whether that's, you know, we do encourage handwriting, but if you only have a laptop, totally fine, at the top of your document, and just write those things down. And then it's time to plan your structure by identifying your beginning, middle, and end. So anyone who already has a story that they've written, that's totally fine. You can either do a rewrite of that story. I wouldn't say we really want to sit and edit that story for now because we do have an editing workshop in a couple of weeks. So if you don't want to touch that story for now and you want to save that for editing, you can write a new one. And then
2 new ones, 3 new ones.
as many as you can fit in. So yeah, I was thinking about your beginning, middle, and end, or your end, beginning, middle, however you want to order it, and you can always change that along the way. And then what we thought might be fun if you want to and you are kind of struggling to start writing was just write for 15 minutes what you think your story is going to be. And then once you've written for 15 minutes, and we'll do a timer for you for anyone who wants to do this, erase your first 4 sentences. So get rid of the first 4 sentences and see where that leaves you. So it is just an interesting thing. It's sort of like what we were talking about before. Stories beginning right in the middle of the action. Can be a bit of fun. It might be a failed experiment, it might go terribly wrong. That's totally fine. It's all part of the writing process. So we'll give you an hour for that. Again, move around, stretch your legs if you need to, get a drink, whatever you need to do. But we're just going to play some very chill music, and this is your time to be writing. It's not really discussion time, but pop your hand up if you have any questions for us and we can come around.
And I would say try not to read over your work too much, because that's when you get in the perfectionist editing mindset. Just try to keep writing in this first session. The second session, we can do a little bit more wrangling with what's on the page, but just try to keep writing. Don't worry about how good or bad it is. Just keep going.
Yeah. Any questions before we start?
And you have to write the 500 words a night.
Not right now. Like we said, you can write way more and cut it down later. This is purely writing time. So we just want you to be trying to get to the heart of that story that you've got in your head. If that all makes sense.
If you have any concerns or if you're really stuck, feel free to come up to us and we can have a more of a one-on-one chat.
Yeah. All right.
That's good.
I need to connect my thing, but we'll set a 15-minute timer and an hour. So we'll let people know if they're going to do the erasing the first 4 sentences when that time is up. But otherwise,
get right.
Go forth and have fun. Any questions from online?
So I'm hearing, Kelly, that we'll start writing at about now, and then there'll be a 15-minute timer at 12:45, and then at 1:30 we'll come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So maybe Tierney, if you want to do a 15-minute timer for your team and let them know, because I might forget to unmute myself. So that might be good. All right. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Maybe, Tierney, if your group have any questions that we missed, just maybe send a WhatsApp message and I can jump on and answer them.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording now.
So our second writing session is where we need to start turning all of our thoughts that might be a little bit more abstract, or our piece that is it might be a little bit all over the place. That's what a first draft usually is, and that's totally fine. We're going to turn it into a solid piece that's ready to be edited. So it doesn't have to be 100% polished and perfect, but we just need all the words on the page so that it can be edited, either if you're coming to the editing workshop or it's going to go to one of our team of editors. And so some questions that you might like to ask yourself at this stage are: what is the key message of your story? What emotions do you want your reader to feel? How can you resolve the problems you introduced at the start of your story? And then just know that this is the end to this segment of your story. It doesn't have to wrap up perfectly. And just finish it as best you can. So you've got another hour to do that. So you've got plenty of time. You can sit with your piece, read it over a few times, read it out loud to yourself is great as well, because that can put it in a sort of a different frame. And then we'll come back, at like 2:30. And we'll have some time to type up if you're not typing. Otherwise, we'll do a little reflection on the day. So are there any questions? You can send one into the chat as well if you want to, and I can answer it.
I would just like to know, are we supposed to only have 5? You said 500 words, Tierney?
So 500 words is the word limit for our stories. Today, it can be it's like at uni, you can do sort of 10% above or below. So like 450 to 550 is pretty good, and then it'll go through the editing process and it will usually end up around 500 words. So again, don't stress too much about it being 500 words on the dot. Just get around that.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. And remember, you can do as many stories as you want. And then you can even, if your story is really long, you can cut it into 2 if you want to as well. You can have like part 1, part 2. But yeah, so that's it. And just let me know if you have any more questions. Oh, yep, Susie?
Yes, I was going to ask more of a technical question. So as a writer, when you tell your story, how do you decide whether you want to talk about in a past tense or present tense? You know, English is now for a lot of us now our first language, and I often get confused.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for me, I would do, I think there's like a parade going past right now. It's wild. Anyway, sorry, all the action here. Often I would go with whatever comes naturally to you when you first start writing. So think about your first line. If you go, I woke up that morning, just stick it in past tense. If you go, I wake up in the morning and feel blah, 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 stick with that. And then this is something that I don't know if you're coming to the editing workshop, but it's definitely something that we'll cover in the editing workshop. And the structural editing stage is all about that. It's that your editing partner will look at yours and go, it's really good, but I think it needs more urgency. So I'm going to take it out of past tense and put it in present tense.
Okay, cool.
So does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I can always, we have some question time in a bit, so we can jump on and talk some more about that if you need some more help.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. No worries at all.
I have a question regarding the editing because I won't be there. But when you're saying, like, for example, you'll be editing it, how much flexibility or what, like, in other words, like, do you change a lot? Do you change the words itself?
It'll really depend on the piece. So if you don't come to the workshop, your piece will probably be edited by people like myself and Sydney and a few of the people that we know who we've brought on board. And what happens is every editing stage, we send those suggested edits back to you, and you approve or reject them. So there's nothing that we change that you don't know about. We're not going to fundamentally change your story and then you just are looking at this piece and it's like you didn't write it. You are going to know and be aware of everything, and it might be pretty fundamental changes because we really want you to get to the heart of your story, and we want your story to speak like your truth, but it needs to sound like you as well, so we're aware of that too. Yeah, is that all good? Does that answer your question all right?
So just in terms of process, you should all have a link in your email addresses. That is a folder to your story. So you should see, if you're registered online, there might be a PDF of your registration. And if you've submitted a story online, there might be a Word document online. So if you don't have that, this is the time, or in the next hour, so let me know and we'll work that out. So that's where Junie, to add to what Kelly was saying earlier, that's where the editing team will be working through some of those pieces. So they'll be going in and obviously making suggested edits through there, and you'll be able to access them through there and make changes that way.
Yeah, and we'll keep, it'll be quite structured. So your original story will stay in there, and then we'll do a copy of it with the edits, and then a copy of the next edit. You'll have like maybe a few versions of your story, but you'll always be able to access the original one.
Hey, Fahana.
Junie, I think you're on mute.
Oh, Fahana's got her on.
Oh, sorry. I'm happy for Junie to finish.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
A massive fail. So I was just saying that if you want the document to be a Word document, a Mac Pages, or a Google Doc?
Google Doc, if possible, I think will be best. Yeah. We can work with Word documents as well, but I think we'll do it all through Google. Yeah. Fahana? Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong.
Yes, no, you got it right. Thank you so much, Kelly. My question is more for firstly letting you know that the workshop so far has been fantastic. So thank you heaps for that, and shout out to Tierney for that as well. My question to you is suppose more pertinent when we get to the editing round of the workshops, but I've got a number of submissions and they're all quite different from each other in themes and style. So what I would love some guidance on is if you kind of have a steer on the kind or the tone that's missing and you want to add more of in the overall submissions, because I'm guessing you want a really nice range of types of submissions, both joyous and the other stuff. So if you could let me know, and we can do an initial call at some point, then I can really hone in on editing and fine tuning that particular piece with you. I've uploaded everything in my folder, so thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so when we get to will you be at the editing workshop?
Yes.
Brilliant. So we can work with you on that. I think what we're just working on finishing planning that now. So we might include people who have multiple stories. Maybe for the editing workshop, you might end up just nominating one that gets edited in that time. But you can take the skills that you learn to look at the rest of them. And yes, we can look at all of your submissions and see what is working the best and what we might want more or less of, and that sort of thing as well.
Sounds great. Thank you. And sorry, another last question is, are we allowed to swear in our writing? Like, were you comfortable?
I think so.
Very important question.
No, that's fair enough. Yeah. No,
Okay, cool.
we're not going to be censoring anything like that.
Awesome.
I don't think. Double check, but I feel like that's right. Can you?
Oh, and that is an excellent question. And actually, that's something that we've started thinking about. We might that some of the stories we might add sort of trigger warnings for, like if they might be triggering for people, all of those sorts of things. So absolutely go for it, and we'll add some of that. This is a process that brings up strong emotions. And
well, and also like if you're writing about a conversation or like something that someone else said and their wording is significant to the story, we don't want you to have to change that for that reason. So I think we'll stick with yes for now, and we might get some clarification in the editing process on what we need to do around it. All right, great. Are there any last questions? We'll also have some question time. So if anything comes up during this writing session, jot it down, and either Sydney or I, one of us will be on the laptop answering questions, one of us will be here in the room with the people here. So you'll get some more time like this for about 20 minutes later on.
so Kelly, just to check what we're doing next. Just to check what we're doing
So we're
next.
just doing, it's just another writing session. So this is this is just another hour of writing, and it's just answering those questions, Tierney, that you popped in the chat, and developing your story so that it's ready to be edited, because by the end of this session we want your version of the story that's ready to be edited in your Google Drive folder, ready to go. Okay, and time for typing up after that. I'll send a end time for the writing workshop once we've set these guys up.
Yeah, awesome.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thanks everyone. We'll
Okay, I'm gonna pause recording now.